Dobar dan. Danes naš gost prihaja iz Iraka in sicer je z nami gospod Kemal al-Basri, direktor Inštituta za demokratične reforme s sedežem v Iraku. Predtem pa je bil tudi svetovalec iraškega premijeja za gospodarske zadeve in namestnik finančnega ministra. Welcome to our program, Mr.
Great, thank you very much.
What I have said just now is that in the past you advised the Iraqi Prime Minister on economic affairs, that you were a deputy financial minister. What I didn't say, though, is that you worked as senior analyst for British banks like Lloyds, like Barclays.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about it. What story took you from Iraq to Great Britain and then back again?
Well, I left Iraq in 1977 to complete my postgraduate study, and subsequently I worked in so many British universities in various fields, teaching health economics, labor economics, econometrician, etc. And then I decided to go out of academic area. So I worked for GE Capital and subsequently to Lloyds and Barclays as business analyst and assessment of risk to financial asset in banks.
Mm-hmm. Your surname is al-Basri.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, Basra is the area where I'm born and educated in. I'm born in 1951, and all that period up to 1977 is my education and where I lived. Mm-hmm. And subsequently I left Iraq. And the name al-Basri kept during the oppositions because we hide our identity from the regime because he can go to our family and do something bad.
Sure. But there is another surname that you have in your surname, basically Field. And this
Field.
is?
My father came to Iraq by end of 1930s. And he worked in the port of Basra, and he settled there and married. And that's it. He's originally from UK.
So you're a proper international marriage sort of product,
yes.
Saying in a not very nice way, basically. You have returned to Iraq after a British-American invasion of Iraq in 2003. How do you remember that period? After all those years in opposition, being active in opposition, how did that feel like?
It was an exciting moment to me and my colleagues. We never thought that we'd get rid of Saddam Hussein. Everything being tried and failed, and this has come to us a great hope to us. We are seeing ourselves after the occupation, we will come like Germany, like Japan, and something different than present time at that time. So we are fully, I left my occupations in UK in Barclays banks, and I moved within 2-3 weeks of the invasion of Iraq. I become supervisor to the Ministry of Trade during Bremer leadership of Iraq.
You said in one of the speeches, one of the lectures you had at a very good institute, Chatham House, British Institute, you were basically saying that Iraq won democracy in 2003, but it lost the rule of law. Can you explain what you meant?
Well, rule of law is a fundamental for successful democracy. You cannot have democracy without rule of law. Democracy without rule of law is chaos. An example of that is Iraq.
But how did that happen?
Unfortunately, the management, the coalition management for Iraq after the invasion was poor. You cannot establish democracy by pressing a button and become a democratic. We should build democratic institutions. All government institutions should be fully transparent, work according to efficiency and rule of law, equity and participation. These values of democracy is not being established. We are not aware of it. So democracy without these values end up in chaos, abusing rule of law. And what the coalition did to create stability for Iraq, they brought the idea of government participation, where most opposition, they should come in the government. So we created a team not homogeneous, and each member of the team trying to maximize his own benefit, his party benefit, his people benefit, not the citizen of Iraq. And that's why is the problem. Government failed to deliver even basic services. Up to the standard statistical in Iraq, only 80% of Iraqi have access to clean water to drink, and only 11 hours electricity. That cannot be right after 13 years. So this is what Iraq facing is a failure of institutions. Without institutions, you cannot deliver.
You are supposed to be one of the strongest advocates of technocratic government in Iraq. Okay, it is not probably a very strong possibility at the moment, but what would you say is political picture that could lead to more maybe stable government, a less broad coalition, you know, that could be firmer, quicker, and could do things that people actually need at the moment?
Well, I must say, introduction to your questions, I'm a great believer of Iraq. Iraq is a not new country. We established in Iraq pre-Christianity the civilizations. So we have a long history of civilizations. I cannot see Iraq with these big challenges is diminishing. What we see now after the introduction of democracy, problem similar to what we say in English is a teething problem. It's a problem that of growing. After we're growing, we get rid of these difficulties.
But it's been going on for 13 years. I mean, this is quite a period.
This is the time now.
Period.
This is the time I'm expecting by next year a big change will take place in Iraq. As I said, Iraqi government fell not because people in government are not faithful. They don't have a common ground. They don't have a common agenda. They brought participation, political participation, which is a good thing to do, but you cannot bring this without established rule of law. That's the problem.
Of course.
Political participation, according to the political literature, it would be a wonderful solution for diversity of opinion. But you have to establish first rule of law and then political, and this is the problem. What we suffer is we widen political participation without a common ground. Now, failure of citizen expectation of the government to deliver basic services is become questionable. Iraq is a rich country. In 2012, Iraq became the first growing country in the world, and this is because we managed to produce higher rate of oil and we have financial return. The rate of growth being estimated about 9%, where China 8 and India 6. So people have high expectation of government to do services, to deliver basic services, and government failed for the reason I mentioned to you is institutions, failure of institutions.
Kamal, let me ask you one question. Okay, if the government didn't manage to do what you're saying just now, one strong reason that hampered the fastest progress is probably the security situation. I mean, having ISIS occupying Mosul, Ramadi, some other areas now in Iraq, is probably something that will slow down every single government and cause problems like displacement of people. I mean, that causes huge problems in Iraq currently.
Well, government failure started before ISIS. And ISIS capitalized on that failure. Politicians in government, as I said, everyone trying to maximize his own benefit and his own people. They capitalize on government failure as government is discriminate between people in different areas. And that's created the big problem which started in, 2012 in Ramadi, where big demonstrations continue for so long period of time. And Daesh, IS, found a fertile land for this. Now, when we come to say about IS, it is not fair to say it's Iraqi created IS. It's wrong. Nobody can convince himself by saying this. IS is a big thing. It's beyond Iraq's ability.
Sure.
IS has a financial and weapon and technology. I give you an example. They can jam the communication system before they enter an area. That's something not an ordinary country can do that. IS can extract oil and marketing oil and sell oil. IS has got access to weapon we who don't have. So there is two reasons for this problem, that we create a fertile land for IS to come, and there is intervention of neighboring countries. Neighboring countries, they saw in the change in Iraq is worrying for them. They are oversensitive what's going on in Iraq. In particular, let's be clear, after the invasion of Iraq, the Shia become dominant in the country. And a Sunni country like Saudi Arabia become sensitive for that. And it's oversensitivity and led them to react in different way. The American, during 2003 and 4, managed to help us in most countries to drop their debt. So the debt, which around $144 billion, reduced by 80%, with exception of Saudi Arabia. And I posed the question to the American at that time, why you are not able to do that? Why you managed to do all this without Saudi Arabia? And I haven't got a clear answer for that.
Okay, this is an interesting question. But let me ask you one other thing. I mean, looking back at what was going on in 2003, and looking back at how the things were developing at the time, we had this Chilcot report last summer, and the Chilcot inquiry was very critical of Tony Blair joining the George Bush and everything, doing what they did for one reason, because they said not all non-military means were exhausted yet. If you look at what was going on in the last 13 years, would you say that this invasion went too quickly, too soon, without firm proofs that they can prove to Saddam Hussein he had all prohibited weapons?
Well, for Iraqis, getting rid of Saddam Hussein is a priority. But I cannot justify the military intervention, which is not get rid of Saddam Hussein, is cost Iraq a lot in terms of infrastructure and quality of life. We are suffering till this moment. We don't have electricity up to this moment.
Yeah,
and
you were saying 11 hours per day.
And nobody helping us from the coalition who promised us to help to build Iraq. We left alone. I give you example on we left alone. Daesh came to Mosul of a sudden. And we seeked our alliance, United States and all the allies, British, to help with this. And we come to surprise as Iraqi citizen and to hear Obama saying, we don't have exactly now a plan, strategy to fight Daesh. I think it takes us 3 years. We cannot find from where he come 3 years, not 4 years, 2 years, and why don't have a strategy for his alliance. Yeah? So we don't think they have definitely a strategy to help Iraq. We have that feeling as a citizen of Iraq.
The question is, does anyone have a real strategy how to help Iraq at the moment? Does the Iraqi government have a clear strategy and vision what should be done in the foreseeable future?
It is now impossible for Iraqi to build a strategy. Because the team of Iraqi government, people of different opinion, different interest, and they cannot sit together to agree on agenda. And I have a tremendous example on aspect of reform that's good for the nations. And if the Prime Minister al-Maliki suggests a reform, for example, which is good for Iraqi, the opposition party interprets it in a different way and asks his people to come for a demonstration to stop that reform. So given the experience of the last 13 years, I am not optimistic that we are in this way of running politics can help Iraq. What is required now from the coalition is the call for international conference on Iraq, where all political parties should participate with neighboring countries. And we agree on plan for reform, where every party, whether internally, externally, committed for the reform. We need not financial support because we have the oil. We need capacity building to manage the reform, which is important for it. We have failed to even reform the banks, reform the subsidy system, a lot of things. We cannot manage to do the electricity despite of available financial resource. And this is due not homogeneity in the politics of Iraq. So I really call for international conference under the umbrella of United Nations to manage the reform in Iraq. I have problem and suspicion that those actors who invested in Daesh will not accept just a defeat and go away.
So what do you reckon is going to happen now? Now everyone, all the forces, neighboring forces concentrate on Mosul. It doesn't mean that Daesh is going to go away just like that. So is this going to cause security problem elsewhere, in Iraq or other neighboring countries?
Well, if Iraq failed to manage this process properly, Iraq will be a breeding ground for criminal and international terrorists. And thus will spill over to other countries. And we can see this now, even in Europe, in Paris and elsewhere.
Yeah.
So the way to manage this, which is not just a favor for Iraq, is for the international community. All actors, superpower under the umbrella of United Nations should come together with the politicians from Iraq and neighboring countries, sit together on one table and put agenda for reform. Our constitution is quite good in helping for that reform. I'll give you an example. Decentralization is an important issue that can help us to diffuse the political tension. And we need political will. We have the constitution allowed for it to have a decentralized and even to establish independent regions.
Sure.
But we need capacity building for that. You cannot give freedom to regions without establishing rule of law. That's another chaos. So we need capacity building and agreement international community that no neighboring countries interfere in the business of Iraq.
Kamal, you are always pointing out that education is paramount also in Iraq, and the big investments are needed in Iraqi educational sector. Now, from reports that we can see, you know, Reuters, CNN, and so on, we see Iraqi schools. We see Iraqi schools that are bombed. We see Iraqi schools that are overcrowded because of displacement problem. We see Iraqi schools with lack of modern educational facilities. Now, what needs to be done in Iraq? Because that would quiet the situation down in so many fronts if this would happen, what you are saying.
Well, education is a prime factor for success of democracy. If you go to the political literature and survey all of them and try to find out in what way democracy will flourish and give prosperity to a nation, you will find a single factor, that is education. So education can play in a dynamic process to improve living standard and security in a country. Now, this is far from Iraq. Iraq in the past, probably you know from United Nations report, we are very well established in education. We are an example in the whole region, but that's disappeared. I give you example. Despite of the availability of resources from oil, we are lack to build about 8,848 schools. Absence of school deny education for young people. So if the young people have no education, then they are vulnerable to so many problems. And this problem is not for Iraq.
Yeah. What about religion in Iraqi, not only educational system, but also elsewhere? For instance, you can hardly get any meaningful data on this. But for instance, when you look at the photographs, you will have loads of girls will be covered, of course, which was not the case 13 years ago. This is just an outside sign, of course, but I'm asking you, how important is religion nowadays in Iraqi schooling system?
Well, to be truth, religion is not the main issue of conflict in Iraq. It's been made. As example, we live together.
Shia, Sunni,
Muslim,
Kurdish.
Christian, everything. Even we have religions pre-Christianity living in north of Iraq.
Yeah, but the Syrian population is quickly disappearing, moving away.
Yes, at this time. So we don't have one religion in Iraq. We used to live together with a variety of religion. Religion being used by failure of government to deliver things, opponent capitalize on this. This is now, it is not true. What Basra, which is a main Shia city and the main producer of oil, have similar problem to Ramadi. So why Basra Shia not demonstrating as the Ramadi? They are having shortage of school, shortage of water, shortage of electricity.
Okay, now we are all the time talking about bad news coming from Iraq, but tell me something good that happened there. Tell me something of achievements that have been made in the last 13 years. There must be, I mean, the unemployment, the rate of unemployment is smaller, the rate of poverty is smaller, if those statistics are correct, of course.
Well, Iraq made a tremendous success since 2003. Well, you mentioned, for example, employment. At the time of the coalition in 2004, the estimated unemployment is above 50%. Then this moved quickly down to 30 and reduced to 90%.
What was unemployment level in the time of Saddam Hussein?
I cannot be sure because the statistic is manipulated, but in 2004, estimated is above about 54%. So we can say this is maybe coming from the era of before Saddam Hussein.
Sure.
Because the era of Saddam Hussein is an era of where the coalitions, America, surrounding Iraq, they cannot export oil. There's embargo on Iraq. We cannot export, we cannot import, and it becomes difficult for people to live at that time.
I mean, there was this long period of sanctions against Iraq.
Yes, the sanction.
Nowadays, can you still feel the influence of the sanction regime from that period?
Well, there is still some element of the sanctions, particularly it's being reported when Ministry of Oil or Industry want to import particular equipment. They say this is still under embargo and has to be removed by United Nations. So still, but Iraq, to answer the question, we made tremendous success in improving the infrastructure for oil. The industry starting working, the agriculture now, we become more or less sufficient in producing certain product in agriculture. In everything, the income, the population income now is about $66,000 a year. It used to be around 1.5. So there is some improvement, but this improvement is slow, and with the oil and the finance that we get from oil, we should expect doubling that increase in the growth.
Mr. Kamal, thank you so much for helping us understand Iraq a little bit better, and of course, all the best to your country. Thank you.
I have the pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.